As a Canadian, perhaps I remember 9/11 in a slightly different way than my American friends, and perhaps the rest of the world. When that first plane hit the first tower, I was completely unaware that it had even happened. It was one of those September days that kind of is the example for what you want all other September days to be like, for the most part, except for what happened. We don't want that to ever happen again. I had a buddy who needed to fill a prescription for eyeglass, and so I just went out with him that day. We just went for a walk to the eye doctors, and about halfway there, this fella walked up to us and said, "Hey, did you hear what happened?" I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, America's under attack." And I was like, "What?" I just couldn't conceive the idea that America would be attacked, that there would be any kind of attack on American soil. It was not something I could ever conceive. So we get to the optometrist, and you know how usually when you get to a place, people greet you and say hello and how are you doing and that kind of thing? That didn't happen when we got here. Instead, there were two ladies that were behind the counter, and they were watching this television that was up high, that if you're in the waiting room waiting to, for your appointment to get your eyes checked, or maybe to have a consultation to purchase glasses there was a waiting room area and there was a TV, and they were watching that TV. And on that TV was CNN news footage of what was happening in New York City that day. Those ladies didn't even notice I was there. They didn't even care, because their faces were just so glued to that television. They had a look of horror, surprise, and shock on their face all at once. And we just stood there and watched the television together for a good 5 minutes, and then we watched the second tower come down. And I'm not sure if it was real time or if they were replaying what was happening. I don't remember. It's been a long time. It's been like 15 years, and that's a long time for this big stupid head to remember everything. So we get back to my place, and I lived central. I lived right downtown. And I knew a lot of people back in the day when I was 20, 21 years old. And people kind of looked up to me back then, because I spent a lot of time with people, working with them and encouraging them and trying to help them become better people. And so people sort of looked up to me back then at that time in my life. Because of this, they all sort of ended up at my house. One by one, I'd get a knock on my door, and I'd open it, and it would be someone I know, and I'd come in, and they'd be like, "What's going on? I just saw this on the news. What's happening?" And they were looking for some kind of support or comfort for what they didn't understand was happening around them. Probably had about 8 or 10 people show up at my house, confused and scared, looking for answers that I couldn't give them because I didn't have the answers myself to give them. I remember seeing some more footage about 9/11 in the coming days that kind of passed 9/11. I think I was at a friend's house, maybe that night even, and I saw footage of people jumping from very, very high, jumping out the windows to evade the heat and the flames that were clearly licking their skin, and they didn't want to burn to death. They were faced with the decision: do I want to burn to death in agony in this building, or do I want to say my final goodbyes and have one last act of my life that I can decide for myself what I'm going to do? Do I want to jump out this window and avoid burning to death? And I remember just feeling so heartbroken for these people. I was heartbroken watching these people just jump out the window head first to perish on the sidewalk below, because they'd rather do that than die by the heat of the flames. I also remember hearing about a plane where the people actually fought back in the plane. I guess they had the terrorists had box cutters, and that's how they would hold the people in the plane hostage to gain control of it. And they'd get into the cabin, and they would keep everyone out of the cabin. Well, I guess some people on this other flight rushed the cabin, rushed the terrorists, and yeah, the plane crashed and they all perished, but they perished as heroes because they stopped that plane from hitting its target. And to me, that showed the spirit of the American people, that they weren't going to go down just sitting in their seats cowering, that when given the chance, they would fight back and save other lives, even if it meant that their lives were going to be forfeit. 9/11 really shook me to my core. It's something that I'll never forget, and it's one of my defining moments in my history as a human being. As a Canadian on the outside looking at all this happening, I remember thinking, they're the world superpower, and they're a target. And a religious ideology that hates them and hates everything that they stand for decided to perpetrate these horrible acts on innocent American people, non-combatants. And that's who America, that's who the world, that's who everybody who is fighting all of these Islamo-extremist groups is fighting. I learned because of 9/11 that there are people that will hide behind women and children on purpose. I've learned because of 9/11 that there are people who, because of their religion, will do whatever it takes to secure, as far as they're concerned, the best possible place in the afterlife. I learned that people can be cruel and harsh and evil and unloving and intolerant because of 9/11. But I also learned because of 9/11 that people can be giving and loving and supportive and come together as a community when really horrible things happen. 9/11 showed us some of the very worst that the human race is capable of, and that day also showed us some of the very best that the human race is capable of. We're capable of so much evil and so many horrible things that we are our own monsters. But we also have this ability to come together and love each other and support each other and be arm in arm when really horrible things happen. And 9/11 showed us that too. I suppose my final thoughts on 9/11 are that it showed us as the human race that we really do need to be more tolerant of each other and what we're into. Because if you don't tolerate what other people are into, then it bubbles up into hate. And hate produces death. I'm not saying that you have to accept everything that everyone does. There's definitely a lot of really bad things in the world that I'm not expecting anyone to ever accept, like pedophilia and murder and things like that. Those things are never to be accepted. I'm talking about if somebody has a belief system, whether it's political or of a religious creed that you don't understand or agree with, I say live and let live. Let them do their own thing. If they're not hurting anybody, leave them alone. And you do your own thing. You focus on your own life, because we don't have the right to tell any other people, any other culture, any other religion how they should be living their life and what choices they should be making. We can tell people what we think and we can make suggestions, but in the end, we need to let people live their own lives as their own individuals. 9/11 was also a really good example of what happens when people don't tolerate the beliefs and the ideas of other people. This can't happen again, people. We need to change. We need to be better than we have been. Because in the end, it's not global warming that's going to kill us all. It's not some kind of asteroid that's going to fly from outer space and hit our planet that we have to be worried about. The thing that we have to be worried about the most, more than anything, is ourselves. When this world perishes, it's not going to be from an outside source. If we're not careful, when the human race goes extinct, it's going to be because of us, because we did it to ourselves. I remember 9/11, and I want you to as well.